Hello, everyone. After today's class, I felt the need to clarify some things, or at least make some suggestions about DeGeorge's criteria for whistleblowing. Um, and I'd like to start with how he prefaces this. This is on page 6. And this, admittedly, is really only related to uh, criteria 1 through 3, where he says this: I would suggest as a rule of thumb, a rule of thumb that may or may not be familiar expression to you. What is it? Whatever Oxford language's definition. A broadly accurate guide or principle based on experience or practice. And I think what I would, let's go to Wikipedia. The broadly accurate thing. In English, the phrase rule of thumb refers to an approximate method for doing something based on practical experience rather than theory. Um, So a rule of thumb is a loose rule. This is what I want to get at. I mean, it's a rule of thumb. It is a guide or a precept, but it is not a strict rule. And I think that perhaps that needs to be said that it may not be that all of these rules are strict rules in the sense that they're absolutely necessary. That is, there may be exceptions. I'm trying to say. So if we take them as rules of thumb rather than strict rules, I think that perhaps that would be the way to be most fair to George. So that's the first thing I want to say, that maybe these were not meant as absolutely necessary rules. There are strong suggestions, perhaps, but as we'll see, I think that they're calling them rules of thumb would allow for exceptions. So, just so we're clear, the first three of these criteria are what need to be fulfilled if whistleblowing is to be ethical at all. That is to be morally permissible. So that these are the things that need to be fulfilled to go ahead and blow the whistle. And remember, whistleblowing is just going outside the organization or company uh, with news of the wrongdoing at your organization or company. That can mean the news media, government regulatory entity, professional society, any way that any body that would make the thing publicly known. So the first three criteria are again meant to be the ones that need to be fulfilled before it's ethical to do that. The fourth and fifth are the things that would make whistleblowing an actual duty. So the idea is that 1 through 3 could be fulfilled and it would therefore be ethical to blow the whistle, but the engineer would be under no duty to blow the whistle. That is, 1 through 3 could be fulfilled, and the engineer could decide to do nothing, and that would be okay because there would be no moral obligation to do it. It would be okay to do morally, but it would not be obligatory to do morally. 4 and 5, if 4 and 5 were fulfilled, then it would be obligatory. And the idea is that if 4 and 5 are not fulfilled, then the engineer really doesn't have to do anything. So I think that that's the most important thing. First of all, saying, well, it may be that DeGeorge did not mean these to be absolutely strict rules, just rules of thumb, and also this very important distinction between the conditions that would make something morally permissible and then the further conditions that would make it morally obligatory. Um, let's consider them rules of thumb. These are the general rules given, all things being equal, you might say. so that allows for exceptions. Right? Um, for instance, let's take 2 and 3 criteria in 2 and 3, which indicate that the engineer cannot, ethically at least, blow the whistle unless they're fulfilled. Two, that they make their concerns known to their superiors. And three, if getting no satisfaction from that, they exhaust all internal channels available within the corporation. I think that is best seen as a rule of thumb. That is, there may be, this is sort of the default rule that you should do this, but there may be circumstances in which it would be unreasonable to require the engineer to do this. And I think some of these things came up in class. That is, if, for instance, it would clearly mean that making this known or making this sort of complaint or making these observations to management would mean losing your job. Maybe that would be an exception. Maybe it wouldn't. I don't know. Does DeGeorge really think that you have to risk losing your job to before blowing the whistle? Is morally permissible? That would kind of go against the spirit of what he says at the beginning. So that may be an exception, and maybe he doesn't say, um, but it may actually be. I don't know. We can think of other situations in which it just would not be reasonable to require this sort of thing. I don't know. So moving on to 4 and 5. Now remember, 4 and 5 are about what would actually lay the duty on you to blow the whistle. Right? That is, 4 and 5 are about the circumstances under which you would have an obligation to blow the whistle. And it actually, as rules of thumb, if we continue to interpret these criteria this way as rules of thumb rather than strict necessary rules, seems quite reasonable. Actually, that is, that it would be unreasonable to say that an engineer had a duty to blow the whistle if they did not have evidence that would convince an impartial observer. That is, unless they could back up their whistleblowing, their accusation of wrongdoing with some kind of documentary evidence that would be convincing to a reasonable, impartial observer. I think that that's probably pretty reasonable. That is, what is that saying? That you can't be said to have a duty to blow the whistle unless you can really back up what you say. Even if you have a strong suspicion that you're right, you can't be required, have a duty to blow the whistle unless you can prove it. Now, remember, the fourth and fifth are what make it morally obligatory. So the implication is that if you fulfill 1 through 3 and don't have that documentary evidence, then you can go ahead and ethically blow the whistle. It's just that no one can say that you have a duty to do it without that evidence. So that needs to be said, and perhaps that's the one thing that wasn't said in today's class that I felt bad about not making clear. That is, you could, if you fulfill 1 through 3 and you don't have documented evidence for your information, then you can still blow the whistle ethically. It's just that you can't be said to have a duty to do it if you don't have that kind of documented evidence. Similarly, with number 5, there must be strong evidence that making the information public will, in fact, prevent the threatened serious harm. Again, you don't have to have number 5 fulfilled in order to blow the whistle. You can go ahead and do it after 1 through 3. The point of 4 and 5 is they're saying you cannot be said to have a duty to do it. You're not morally obliged to do it without these 2 conditions being fulfilled. So just wanted to say a few more words, very simple, I hope, but maybe needed to be said today